Hi, Flo. Yes, it is the second day, and as you say, yesterday the President did allude to the fact of or rather emphasize the importance of intra-Africa trade. This is a topic that we've been having for many, many years, but to see a step of this magnitude through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area actually being implemented and seeing the Africa Trade Fair playing a part in terms of bringing together goods and services as well as traders, governments, business leaders together to start having those talks is a really commendable step. It's quite just commendable, Flo, because of where the world has been in the past year with the pandemic. Obviously that has put brakes on a lot of plans that we've had as a country and a lot of plans that we've had as a continent as well. Today, Flo, we have been focusing on the automotive sector as it has been identified as one of the sectors that can be a catalyst for growth in Africa, and that when we do intra-Africa trade, obviously the manufacturing of components and cars is already happening here in the country. We're seeing companies such as Nissan wanting to set up regional plants and to move the whole intra-Africa trade movement of automotive sector and goods as well as services, which is quite commendable. Toyota has also has got a plant in South Africa. Nissan, as I said earlier on, has got a plant in Roslyn, and they're planning to go out into the rest of the continent. We are continuing with this conversation and talking to the CEO of Trade Investment KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Neville Matjie, and we're talking about the cost of automobile. I'm sure you know that the cost of buying a car in South Africa is quite expensive, and also the cheap imports, the kind of impact that those are having on the sector. Mr. Matjie, thank you so much. Earlier on, just before we went on camera, we're talking about the cost of cars in South Africa, or maybe even in the region, that we are overpricing ourselves, and this is working to our detriment, isn't it?
Absolutely. We create a space for imported vehicles, these second-hand vehicles coming into our markets, especially what you see predominantly in the rest of the continent. There are only two countries really that have protected the automotive sector within the continent, and those are Egypt and South Africa. But once you look at the cost of buying a brand new vehicle, of course, it's quite astronomical. So that's something the automotive sector has to really take into account to try and see how they can improve on that. Of course, most of the other things that would be required would be some level of support and incentives to get the automotive sector at a place where it's really self-sustaining. But over and above that is the development of the entire value chain. The first, second, and third tier suppliers to the automotive sector quite critical, and that's one area of focus KwaZulu-Natal has looked into. We have a very mature sector, but a sector that's still growing. Because it's still growing, we want to continue to nurture it, and the Premier has directed us to actually establish an automotive supplier park, which will be an SEZ specifically focusing on the automotive sector. So a lot of work that is currently under play in that regard. And as I said, the Premier has been quite decisive to ensure that the mature sectors, we continue to realize growth within those sectors and encourage additional growth within those sectors.
Yeah. I was speaking to an entrepreneur who is based in the Eastern Cape. He supplies parts to Mercedes-Benz. And I was wondering that as a provincial government, what are you doing in order to help entrepreneurs in this who are in the sector, who want to be part of the value chain, whether it's the first, second, or third tier?
So what we've done so far, in partnership with Toyota, we've identified specific products that Toyota is currently importing. And through our mother Department of Economic Development and our MEC, Ravi Pillay, we've actually put in place a program to capacitate emerging companies that can supply products into Toyota. It could be a nut, and if you are able to establish a company that meets the specification of the OEM, then most certainly they'll buy into that. So that's one proactive stance that Toyota has done with us as a province. Similar program that we're doing with the yellow sector, the yellow metal sector. Of course, Bell Equipment is also specifically looking at expanding. And of course, the reach in terms of the sector is quite vast and wide for the province.
Yeah. Let's talk about the trade ports or the ports. You have some goods arriving in Durban harbors with obviously the COVID and the pandemic. How have you seen the movement being interrupted, and how are you helping that sector to once again get into shape?
Yeah, it's been very difficult with COVID. COVID has really had a major impact on our economy. As a result, we have actually put together an economic recovery plan for the province of KwaZulu-Natal, where we've identified 14 different sectors or 14 key interventions that are sectorally focused. And in each of those sectors, we're looking at the entire value chain. One is, how do we resuscitate the sector? And part of the resuscitation is where the sector has lost jobs, how do we ensure that we keep those skills and continue reskilling those people so that they don't lose the skill. The second one is, how do we get the industry back onto its feet as quickly as possible? And it could be several interventions, and some of which we find that we've actually, with one company, it has actually broken off into 3 different components, and each one has become a fabrication facility that actually supplies into the broader manufacturing. So instead of the entire operation disintegrating into nothing, it's actually broken down into 3 components having 3 owners, but they all collaborate because they used to work together. Yeah. So those are just some of the strategies that we've put in place.
In 2018, this conference was held in Egypt, and about 40,000 or $40 billion worth of deals and investment were signed. Have you had any interesting deals that you've signed or investment conversations that you've had with any of the member countries?
At the moment, on the export side, there's been quite a few that have been emerging. We're still quantifying those numbers. On the investment side, that is a little bit long-winded. We have presented at least 15 catalytic projects to African Bank for funding. They have funded 2 already so far, which is the one in Richards Bay, and there's one in Newcastle. Now, we're currently looking at the balance of the 13, but we're developing additional projects. But with the funding life cycle, unfortunately, it doesn't happen overnight. So these are projects that we've been working with the African Bank on for the last year to ensure that we get them to bankability. But African Bank has been a very good partner. They've committed to actually supporting businesses within South Africa, and really they've come to the party in that regard. It's just that unfortunately access to finance tends to take a long time before you actually get to final bankability. Yes. But we've been quite excited. There is one that is quite mature, and I'm hoping that we'll announce it fairly soon, potentially by the Presidential Investment Conference in March next year, that we'll be able to announce that it's a tourism-related facility project, which is just north of Durban. So we're really looking forward to those types of projects. Yeah,
in general, are you satisfied with the way that, for instance, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is going? There is issues of trade barriers and also rules of origin and all those nitty-gritties that still need to be tightened, the screws that need to be tightened. As a department, are you satisfied with the direction that is generally taking?
I wouldn't say satisfied until we see it happening. At the moment, of course, it's been enacted, which is a big step. It's a huge step. Now, what needs to happen is those non-tariff barriers need to be cascaded, because the heads of state have committed to it. The national departments have committed to it. But it's going to talk to the border. It's going to talk to those officials that create challenges at that level where you need to get the goods crossing the borders. And as long as you're dealing with facilitation fees, etc., that's really detrimental to the true essence of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And I know the team in the Secretariat are busy working on that together with our colleagues at the National Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. So those are key areas that will make it happen. But once we realize it, we'll get to see a boom in African trade. And as KwaZulu-Natal, we've actually put together products that we're exporting into that we can export to the continent in line with the agreement. But what we've further done is we're currently assessing what products can we bring in. The ones that we're importing from other destinations outside of the continent, we want to replace them with product from the continent. And so we're already importing the product.
There is capability, really.
Correct. We're already importing them already from other destinations. So why don't we rather focus on encouraging our companies to rather focus on importing them from the continent? Yeah. Then we can. That's true commitment to the AFCTA.
Mr. Matjie, thank you so much. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. Flo, that is the CEO of Trade and Investment KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Neville Matjie, chatting to us about a range of issues and saying that they are actually thinking of all those products that have been imported from elsewhere. They'll start to make a concerted effort to make sure that they are imported from African countries, and that is one of the ways that they're practically starting to enact and to work with this Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that has been signed. But from what I've seen here today, Flo, the mood is actually right. The mood has been very positive. Businesses are really expectant and businesses are happy, and government really has made the right noise. But the implementation is one thing that is always going to be key. We can have conferences year in, year out. For as long as we do not see implementation of certain things, it will always remain those conferences that we cross live to every year. And that's all from us here for today.
All right, Diabo, thank you so very much to you. Diabo is at the Intra-Africa Trade Fair in Durban for us. We'll certainly be catching up with her as the fair does indeed continue over the next couple of days. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has declared